Hello and welcome to Who Wore It Better, where I review Raw and Smackdown back to back and try and figure out which show won for the week. Well, Elimination Chamber is come and gone, but before we go to WrestleMania, we have to build toward the company's often most forgotten pay-per-view, Fastlane. Let's see how we get there. Triple H opens Raw and he says that while the corporate part of him disapproves of what Becky Lynch did on Sunday, personally he enjoyed what Becky did to Charlotte and Ronda after the Women's Championship match. Then he goes on to talk about how DX is getting inducted into the Hall of Fame later this year, which I will talk about in more detail later in this review. Then he announces the big news on Monday night where 4 NXT stars are making their Raw debut that night: Ricochet, Aleister Black, Ciampa, and Gargano. Big news, very exciting, but I have one question. Why? Because, other than possibly to pop a rating or to get people talking about it, I think showing these guys off on Raw with absolutely zero build is an odd choice. So after the big announcement Triple H has for the NXT guys, he puts a big wet blanket on everything by announcing a tables match right then and there between Braun Strowman and Baron Corbin. I will say this match was a slight improvement from what happened on Sunday, mostly because it got a decisive finish. I do think that putting these two guys in matches with weapons, I think that helps accentuate their positives, hide their negatives in the ring. I think their chemistry, these two in particular, is improved when weapons are involved. I think that was the case with this match here. The story is, Corbin is targeting Braun's torso, which is covered in that voodoo tape, but eventually Strowman recovers and slams Corbin through the table in the corner, which is very similar to what happened on Sunday, but this time he actually wins the match. So no involvement from Drew or Bobby in this match, and I'll tell you more about what I thought about that follow-up later in this review. As Strowman walks up the ramp, Paul Heyman appears, gives Braun some sass, and he immediately regrets it. And so then, after the commercial break, Paul Heyman introduces a package narrated by Paul Heyman, talking about the story of Brock Lesnar, how he grew up on a farm, and he went to college and won the NCAA Division I Men's Heavyweight Championship. He went to WWE, he went to UFC, absolutely nothing happened in between, no siree. He went to UFC, dominated there, and then came back to the company and beat the streak, and it ends on kind of a to-be-continued note. Then after that, Finn Balor interrupts Paul Heyman. Lots of interruptions and kind of overlapping things going on in this first portion of the show here. So Finn cuts a promo after the break talking about how awesome it is to be the new IC champion. Then Lio Rush interrupts, and Lio says that Lashley deserves to be champion. Lashley beats down Finn from behind, so I guess these two are cool again after what we saw on Sunday. Ricochet makes the save, and before you know it, we got a tag team match, playa. In this tag team match, the whole goal is to pretty much put Ricochet over as a big deal, as a big star, and of course he gets all his flippy shit in, so I think he's shown off well in this, between his stuff in the ring and the fawning, glowing commentary the announcers have for him. But again, the crowd just does not give a shit about what Ricochet's doing. He does the backflip superhero landing thing that's so over, and the crowd just did not register with them at all. They had no idea what they were seeing, or they didn't know what to react to. They didn't know what to make of it. I know that not every main roster, Raw, SmackDown viewer is gonna watch NXT and know what's going on, but I mean, come on. What Ricochet's doing in the ring is pretty damn impressive. Anyway, Ricochet wins for his team with a 630 on Lio Rush. And more love to Ricochet and Finn, but more so Ricochet from the announcers. Backstage, Drew McIntyre confronts Triple H and says he wants a match with Seth Rollins to prove that he belongs in the main event of WrestleMania. Dean Ambrose shows up, slaps Drew in the face, and walks away, and Drew wants a match with Dean instead that night. And so I think pretty much any question now whether or not Dean is a babyface is put to rest. For now, I guess. Things could literally change from week to week. A short and sweet match between the Lucha House Party and Hawkins and Ryder. Lindsay Dorado pins Kurt Hawkins for the Luchas to win. Then after that, we go to Charlie Caruso, who interviews Heavy Machinery on the stage. Tucker is the more verbose of the two, and Otis just yells things. Lacey Evans interrupts that, and she does the strut. The best part of Lacey Evans coming out is Otis's head moving to the beat of the song, duh, duh, da 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 da. That part was amazing. So she does her strut down the ramp, back up. They're on the top of the stage. Then the Heavy Machinery do their bushwhacker walk down and up the ramp. And they just stand there for a bit on stage. And Corey Graves, right before it fades to black, goes, I'm not sure what we just saw. That was the best call he had all night. But seriously, is the Lacey Evans condition now contagious? Backstage, Gargano and Ciampa are having a chat, and they're approached by Ruble, the former Raw Tag Team Champions. Then they're joined by the current Raw Tag Champs, the Revival. They all have some words. Then we go to our next match, the Revival versus DIY, who are pretty much they're reuniting on TV for the first time as a duo since their breakup. And, you know, not including Halftime Heat when they were in the six-man, or house shows where they're teaming together there when no one outside that audience knows it and sees it. So yeah, the reunion of DIY is kind of being wasted on Raw because we have not seen that yet on NXT television proper. Like, they've been hinting at it, and there's still kind of animosity, and Gargano has flatly said, I don't want to deal with Ciampa, I can do this on my own sort of thing, but there's still kind of like the tension, like will they, won't they? But here on Raw, they're just giving it away, which I think is silly, and I know that, you know, not every main roster watcher is going to watch NXT. So when a lot of people complain about so-and-so's being ruined on the main roster, you know, to the average fan, they're not going to know the difference because they don't follow NXT. And you have to keep in mind, yeah, those two worlds are still pretty distinct and separate, but still the fact that they are just kind of like jumping ahead in the narrative and having Gargano and Ciampa together again, like nothing really happened, or like everything's water under the bridge now, I think that is a little silly. That being said, this match was really good. Not quite on the level of their wars in NXT and their takeovers past, but you can't expect them to bust that kind of quality out just willy-nilly. DIY win. Backstage, Finn Balor and Ricochet have a promo. Finn welcomes Ricochet to Raw, and Ricochet says fans haven't seen anything yet. The language in this promo makes me feel like Ricochet, of all the four guys who were brought up on Raw and SmackDown this week, could be the one to stick around across, you know, either show or be called up to the main roster full time. It feels premature on one level, but on the other hand, like, he's kind of like in this place now where he has really nothing else to prove on NXT. He's kind of done all there is to do. There's no loose ends for him as opposed to like the other characters that came up. But you know, anything can happen, whether will they, won't they. Right now it's really unclear, but you know, if he does get called to the main roster, it should make things a lot more interesting. Sasha and Bayley come out to celebrate their big win on Sunday, becoming the first ever women's tag team champions in the company. I guess if you distinguish between like WWE and WWF, then yes, they are the first WWE women's tag team champions, but you know, splitting hairs. So in the promo, Sasha actually says they're willing to defend against anybody, whether it be Raw, SmackDown, or NXT, which sounds very promising to me. You know, the idea of, say, for example, Sasha and Bayley versus the Sky Pirates sounds amazing. Anyway, they're cut off by Nia Jax and Tamina. They look ready for a fight, but Sasha and Bayley cut them off, and the heels powder, and it looks like we have our first little feud for those tag team championships coming up. So the story that broke Monday morning and then was confirmed on Raw that night was that DX are the first inductees into this year's Hall of Fame class. Very deserving of all of like the big groups in the history of WWE. DX is certainly like one of the top ones, so very deserving. So you got Shawn Michaels being a two-time Hall of Famer now, and then you got Triple H, who's getting inducted a little earlier than I thought he would as an executive, honestly. New Age Outlaws, of course, I think they're a Hall of Fame worthy tag team by themselves. Billy Gunn's very interesting because he is currently signed with AEW as a producer, so it's kind of like the enemy is infiltrating. Ooh. And then you've got, you know, X-Pac and China. Now, with X-Pac, I think he's a guy who, you know, he's said so much on Twitter, he doesn't care that he's not being inducted individually. But I think of anyone, I think he would deserve to be inducted individually by himself. A lot of people kind of still hate on X-Pac because of the whole X-Pac Heat thing that happened in like 2000. But if you just look at his body of work, I think X-Pac really deserves to be inducted. I'm glad he is being inducted. But my case for him being inducted individually is just the impact he made on the business. He was a really big agent of change, or a big influencer, you might say, in pretty much allowing all these smaller guys in wrestling to flourish, especially in that company. And, you know, he was a big measuring stick in WWE, where it's like all the newcomers would have a match with him as kind of a litmus test, and if they couldn't have a good match with him, then they didn't really pan out that much. And just his longevity as well, being a member of both the original NWO and the original DX, is, you know, kind of a nice historical footnote. He's done a lot, and I think he's really, in the grand scheme of things, very underrated as a talent, and I think that we as wrestling fans have come to appreciate him like way too late in his career, unfortunately. But I mean, very deserving. And of course, there's China. I think a lot of people would agree that it would have been nice to have China get inducted individually by herself, because I think that really what's interesting is I think her more interesting stuff about her career came after she left DX. Like in this version of the induction, she's being inducted as DX's muscle. And she did some stuff with them as DX, but I think once she broke off with them, that's when her career really took off. So it's interesting. I don't know if they're going to count the stuff after her time in DX. or they're just going to lump everything together and it just encompasses all the timeline. But, you know, again, Chyna was a groundbreaking woman, groundbreaking individual in the company. You can't really tell the story of the Attitude Era without her, so she absolutely deserves to go in, individually or otherwise. Maybe this is a way to try and get her in as an individual entrant, like in years in the future, but who really knows? I mean, because, you know, like I said, Shawn's a 2-time Hall of Famer now, so anything's possible where you maybe start out in a group as a Hall of Fame inductee and then become a singles Hall of Famer later on. I don't think that's happened yet, but maybe it could. Up next, Dean Ambrose versus Drew McIntyre. No siren sounds with Dean's music this time. Very short match. Drew hits Dean with the Claymore twice to win. Just put a little more dirt on top of that grave. Then we go to part 2 of the Brock Lesnar story as told by Paul Heyman. This time it covers pretty much everything from his, you know, time after the streak to his path as champion, beating John Cena at SummerSlam, moving right along to becoming the Universal Champion and holding that forever and a day. I think the Brock stuff was very well produced on Monday. Then backstage, Seth Rollins cuts a promo saying Brock's reign of terror will end at WrestleMania, and even if he leaves on a stretcher, he's still going to walk out as Universal Champion. Dean Ambrose walks into the shot, asks Seth where he was for his match earlier, and then Seth goes, "Have you completely lost your mind?" And Dean goes, and walks off. And so it's just kind of like, oh, wacky wrestling. And that made me so mad. The fact that it just basically retconned the last 4 or 5 months of storytelling between these two. Like, look, I'm all, you know, familiar with, you know, yeah, it's crazy, but it's wrestling, so it's okay. We can be stupid and nonsensical. Like, I understand that mentality, but I mean, you still have to have like the wacky stuff, and that kind of thing makes sense. Like what we saw on Monday with Dean is going like, oh, I'm not bitter and vindictive against you anymore. And I don't, you know, it's like, that really bummed me out, because like, what did we get invested in the last several months for over when we're just going, when that's your way of writing it off, is Dean just going, and walking off. Like, that was disappointing. Also, I'm coming back to this. So over the course of the night, you had Baron Corbin in a match, Bobby Lashley in a match, and Drew McIntyre in a match. You had these 3 guys becoming like a group again at Elimination Chamber, and there was like next to no follow-up on that at all. And also the fact that now Lio Rush is back with Bobby Lashley after they seemingly broke up on Sunday. I'm not a fan of that group. I've made that perfectly clear. But if you're going to have that kind of finish the pay-per-view and not follow that at all in any capacity here, like you're not going to have them helping each other out throughout the course of the night, then what the hell was the point? Elias is in the ring, and I was looking at my watch, and I realized that, at this point, I would imagine Aleister Black's going to interrupt him, and sure enough, that's exactly what happened. Michael Cole describes him as moody when he's making his introduction. That's a weird adjective to describe Aleister Black with. It is a pretty good match here. I think both guys had a lot of moments to shine. Aleister wins with Black Mass, and so big bunch of wins for the NXT guys on the night. So really, again, a question I must ask, what was the point of this all? You know, it's great to see the NXT guys being introduced and having this time to shine on Monday, and then later Tuesday. You know, I'm wondering what the end game with this is. Are they being called up? Is this basically the beginning of, you know, I had this idea, maybe this is the beginning of kind of a rotating tour of NXT guys come up every once in a while, just like kind of like basically what the Cruiserweight division was on Raw a couple of years ago, is basically a live action commercial for 205 Live. In this case, it'd be the same for NXT, but I will say, if people watching Monday Night Raw go flip to NXT this week to see, you know, what's going on with these guys like Gargano and Ciampa, they're going to be super confused because the difference in their treatment toward each other, basically at this point in time. So I'm thinking it could either be kind of like, okay, we're going to show you NXT guys periodically to advertise NXT, or this is a call-up. And if it's neither of those things, I'm not sure what the point was. And again, I must reiterate, the crowd was so bad for the whole show that it really did not it did not bode well for any of these guys making their big Raw debuts, because nobody cared. And I don't think that is proof of like, oh, these guys aren't going to get over the main roster. They need to get over in it. They need to be introduced in cities that are like prime markets for NXT, like, you know, the Northeast or Florida, or Chicago, or somewhere besides, Lafayette, Louisiana. Main event time, it's a Ronda Rousey Ruby Riott rematch, Raggy. Why is this the main event of the show? After what we saw on Sunday and that ridiculously short, terrible match, why would you think that would entice me to see this match again in the main event spot, just on paper? That being said, I think this match is a huge improvement from Sunday in a lot of respects, not just the time that it went, but also the action was very good as well. It makes me wonder if their match on Sunday was just like drastically cut for time at the last minute and this was a make good. Where, okay, we know you got screwed over on Sunday, so here, have more time in the main event and you actually, and work with the space. So yeah, good match overall. Ronda kicks out of 2 Riott kicks before putting the armbar on Ruby, and my favorite part is just before she locks in the armbar, she yells, "I'm gonna win," and then she lays down. Has she done that the entire time? And I've never noticed until now, because that is amazing. After the match, Ronda shakes off attacks from Liv Morgan and Sarah Logan, and she stands tall as we fade to black. This was not a very good episode of Raw. I'll tell you more in the end of this review why I think it suffers so much, but one of my biggest beefs with it was that, 2 of the matches that we saw on this show were pretty much direct rematches from what happened at Elimination Chamber, and they happen to be 2 of the matches on that show I care the absolute least about. Now granted, the sequels on Monday were on the whole better than what we saw on Sunday, but that's not a good way to get me excited to watch the sequels. Like, hey, you thought those matches on Sunday fucking sucked, well here they are again, but don't worry, they're gonna be better this time, but you have to wait and see to find that out. Shane McMahon opens up SmackDown and announces the NXT guys who you saw on Monday will be making their SmackDown debuts on this night. The Miz interrupts and basically admits to Shane that he used Shane to get respect from his father. He wants a rematch. He wants to make things right by Shane. The Usos interrupt and they really start ragging on Miz, calling him a loser. Shane stands up for him, and then the rematch is on. So somewhat of a bland promo to open the show, but it does set up the rematch happening at the next pay-per-view, so there is that. And we also find out later in the night that Mr. Miz is going to be appearing at the pay-per-view in the audience, because it is in Miz's hometown of Cleveland, Ohio. So there's intrigue. First match of the night sees Aleister Black taking on Andrade. Nice callback to last year's takeover in the very same building when Aleister beat Andrade to become the NXT champion. Really good work between these two. These guys have such a good chemistry. And again, like the Revival DIY match on Monday, this is a match where you know they can do more and just really tear the house down, but it's the opening match on SmackDown, not that huge of expectations. So Aleister wins with the black mask, and again, a good showing by both guys. Backstage, DIY's being interviewed when they're interrupted by the Bar, who do not take the new guys very seriously, and boy, seeing these 2 teams right next to each other, it's really glaringly obvious the height difference. I never realized that Gargano and Ciampa were that friggin' short, but when you stand next to Sheamus and Cesaro, then yeah, the height disparity is definitely there. Then we see another backstage bit where Kofi Kingston extends a pancake branch, not an olive branch, a pancake branch to AJ Styles and Jeff Hardy in preparation for their 6-man main event later in the night. So our next match is the Bar versus DIY. Great teamwork being shown by Gargano and Ciampa here. It's almost as if they didn't have this like 1.5 or 2 year blood feud on NXT, because they're just working perfectly together here. No conflict or tension at all. Partway through the match, Ciampa goes for a sunset flip powerbomb on Sheamus, and Sheamus just lands right on Ciampa's ankle, and that looked disgusting. I thought it was going to be one of those like a Sid leg break or something disgusting, but I think he's okay. I haven't heard any reports on the interwebs of any kind of grievous injury, so that's great, because I was really concerned when that happened. Like, oh my God, Ciampa's going to have to relinquish the belt. He's going to be out for 8 months or whatever. But he manages to work his way through the finish, and he rolls up Cesaro with a very deep schoolboy to win the match for his team. And so yeah, good match. Everyone looked good. That botch was scary, but hopefully everyone's okay. Asuka takes on Mandy Rose in non-title action. She cuts a promo on the ring making an open challenge, and Mandy answers the call. Lacey Evans comes and goes. Nice seeing her. Mandy gets hit in the face and sounds like she's been shot or like lost an eye, but it's all a ruse, a ploy to lure Asuka in, drop her throat first into the rope, and then roll her up, and she wins. Mandy Rose scores the upset victory over Asuka. And I know it's like I'm of 2 minds on this. One, I think Mandy Rose is great. I think she's a great performer, and it's cool to see her in this program here with Asuka right now. But at the same time, the timing is just really bad for Asuka, because this is a woman who already had a very up and down 2018, where it's like for the bulk of the year, I think she was really misused. She finally got an uptick in credibility at the end of the year when she won the championship. Then she was gone for the last 3 weeks of television just recently. She finally comes back and she loses on SmackDown to Mandy Rose in the, kind of a fluke thing. And that's after the last time we saw Asuka was at the Rumble, where she tapped out Becky Lynch, who's going to be in the main event at WrestleMania. So what is going on here, We then see more of Ricochet. This time he's taking on old EY, Eric Young of Sanity. Again, it's a nice solid match that shows off Ricochet's skills. And, the crowd here in New Orleans is much more receptive, not just to Ricochet, but literally everything else compared to Lafayette. So the crowd was on point for Ricochet here in this matchup here, as opposed to Monday. So Ricochet wins at the 6:30. Nice seeing Sanity every once in a while. In gorilla position, the New Day cut a promo about Kofi Mania before Kofi's involvement in the six-man main event. We then see a replay of something I forgot to mention in the Raw review of Kevin Owens' latest cell phone footage of him getting ready to make his return to the main roster. Boy, nothing gets me more excited to see Kevin Owens come back than a bunch of vignettes of him just hanging out with his family doing regular guy stuff. The guys from Sunday's Elimination Chamber match are in six-man tag action on Tuesday as Kofi Kingston, Jeff Hardy, and AJ Styles take on Daniel Bryan, Samoa Joe, and Randy Orton. Before the match, Daniel cuts a promo saying that none of the other men in the ring will be challenging for the championship anytime soon. Decent main event, nothing too crazy. The match ends when Kofi pins Daniel to win the match for his team. Shane McMahon shows up and announces that Kofi will be challenging Daniel for the championship at Fastlane, which I wish they were able to stretch this out to Mania. I don't know if they're going to have another match at WrestleMania. I feel it's a little premature to do it at Fastlane. They're obviously capitalizing on the big, emotional push of that. So, I wish it happened at Mania. It might still happen then, but for the time being, what we see on Fastlane should be a good match. Time now for me to say SmackDown wins for the week. Here's one of my biggest issues with Raw on Monday, is that in order for Raw to be a watchable show, they need to have coherent, overarching storylines of at least one or two main stories throughout the night. Even if they're not necessarily great stories, just having them there does a good job keeping the show moving along, giving it a purpose. It needs that because the show is just too long to do what they did on Monday night. It was like a boat without a rudder. Just a big just like a constant gauntlet of all these disconnected things that have no connection to each other, no connection from week to week, barely connection from Sunday to Monday. What a poor follow-up to a pay-per-view by having almost nothing happening really, except for rematches that I don't care about, and not following up on one of the bigger plot points of the night with the big heel group that formed in the middle of the Corbin-Strowman match. None of that happened there. They showed, I will say, to their credit, they showed a lot of people, but they showed a lot of people only once, and never once did they really make me care or tell me why I should care. Even the painstakingly scripted descriptors about all the NXT guys being brought up, they were nice, but I never felt like the announcers who said these scripted words really believed what they were saying. It just seemed too produced. It was nice to see the NXT guys there, but I think their impact was lessened just by all the other shit going on. There was no narrative. There was no overarching story about this show. Like last week when Becky Lynch, the whole story was, will Becky Lynch apologize? That, I think, kept Raw moving at a better pace. This one, not so much. There was no hook. There was no overarching storyline between any of this, except for here's a couple of repeats of what you saw on Sunday, and they're the matches that you don't care about anyway. And also, I know it's not always fair to blame the crowd for a shitty show, but that crowd made it an even shittier show. It's not an issue of the wrestlers not performing. The crowd just didn't want to care from the get-go. They had no reactions for anything. So I think in the case of a bad crowd, sometimes it's the wrestlers' fault, but in this case, I would not fault the wrestlers at all, because Lafayette was just a dismal crowd. SmackDown, not exactly, they didn't really have that many overarching narratives either, but they can get away with it because it's a shorter show, and just the way they structure it, it is paced better, so it's not an issue of you want to kind of keep waiting for something next to happen to follow the next thing of the story. The crowd also was better. That also, I think, helped make it feel better, and I think the matches the NXT guys had on Tuesday were better use of their talents than on Monday. in my opinion. But one of the big pissers for me in this on Tuesday was the way they treated Asuka. Again, it's kind of, I'm of two minds on it, because I want to see Mandy Rose succeed. I think she's a great character, but did it have to come at the expense of Asuka, who we already haven't seen on for several weeks, and she's the champion, and at this point her reign is kind of unproven. It's kind of a mixed bag, and for her to lose like that, I thought was really weak. Let me know what you thought about Raw and SmackDown in the comments section below, and be sure to vote which show you thought was better in the gimmick in the upper right hand corner of your screen. Be sure to thumbs up this video if you like it, subscribe to Wrestling with Regret, buy the t-shirts at prowrestlingtees.com, and check out patreon.com/wrestlingwithregret for exclusive perks and bonus content. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.